Coming up this weekend, flyweights tangle as we have a resurgence. Sijara Eubanks looking to make it 2 in a row in the return back to 125 pounds, taking on the Brazilian phenom. And yes, I say phenom. That is Melissa Gatto. When I look at it for Gatto, little bit of an unknown commodity coming into the UFC. I know a lot of people hyped her up. I was looking forward to her fights. You look at her last fight on the regional scene. She submits Karol Rosa off of her back. It was an amazing one. And then I went back and watched all of the tape. And I'm not going to throw it back to that prediction video for her UFC debut. But I have this to say out of all of it. Very long layoff, very young, poor striking on the regional scene, terrible takedown defense, able to do things off her back, but close fights against not great fighters. And I was unimpressed with the Melissa Gatto that I read about compared to the Gatto whose fights I watched. So I was tuned in, locked and loaded when she was out there for her last time out, being her debut 4 months ago against Victoria Leonardo. And I said in that video, I won't be surprised if she makes advancements in her game. I have this to say to you, Matt, because you picked Gatto, but again, it was still relatively unknown, right? I had no idea that she was going to look as good as she did in that fight.
And no one really did. I know I predicted Gatto, but it was mainly based on her competing in jiu-jitsu tournaments, kind of apart from MMA. Like, it had nothing to do with her MMA career. But to see that she is starting to form into an actually promising MMA talent is a really exciting thing to happen, because at this division, it's sort of become stagnant right now. I know there's a few prospects right now who are starting to come up, Aaron Blanchfield being one of them, especially over the weekend. But when you have a champion who's so dominant, there's always a need for new up-and-coming contenders. And I do feel like Gatto, at least this weekend, has a great opportunity to finally become one of those big prospects, because she is fighting Sijara Eubanks, a fighter who, to be fair, I think the MMA community as a whole doesn't have a great read on Sijara Eubanks, because you look at her record, she's 7-6, like, she's almost 500. Normally fighters with records like that aren't spoken about like Sijara Eubanks is spoken about. But if you actually go and watch her fights and at least consider her level of competition, she is a much better fighter than that 7-6 would suggest, because what she demonstrated against Elise Reed, and yes, I understand, Elise Reed probably shouldn't have been in there with Sijara Eubanks.
Strawweight, on short notice, has a fight against Orion Starr.
But if you see just how good Sijara Eubanks looked in that fight, you kind of get the idea of just how promising of, I guess, a potential champion she could have been all those years ago. Because I feel like Eubanks, you don't want to say self-sabotage, because that speaks to a fighter's mindset, but there's been a lot of oh-by-the-ways with her throughout her career that I do feel like have prevented her from reaching her full potential. Because let's say if we play back Eubanks' career 10 times, do you think she would always be an unranked in-between flyweight, bantamweight all 10 of those times? Probably not. I would assume at least 5 of those she's in the top 10 of one of those two divisions, if not both, honestly, because let me just break down the X's and O's for Eubanks. She's a great offensive wrestler, has very strong hips and really good body takedowns too. Doesn't just rely on the single and double leg, can get it done from the clinch. She has great power punches for this division, has great volume striking, I would say. But there's a big problem with Sijara Eubanks, and it's that her cardio and her volume, I'd say they start at a promising level. You look at her, she's whipping out the jab. When that third round comes, she might have like Dada 5000 cardio. Like, it really does fall off a cliff. And that's what worries me about this matchup with Gatto, because I think Eubanks can go out there and look great for the first 10 minutes. But if she's not able to finish someone who is so tricky on the mat in those last 5 minutes when she is tired, she's going for some of those sloppy takedowns. Even look back at the Roxanne fight. I know she beat Roxanne quite handily, but still, near the end of that fight, Montefiore was able to at least out-grapple her in some areas. And I'm not saying Gatto's the mixed martial artist Roxanne is, but you can at least see some areas where she can have success in the grappling.
For Eubanks, it's 7-6, or is it 8-6? 8-6 would count that 3-rounder on the Ultimate Fighter. For Gatto, such an advancement in her last fight against Leonardo, who is like the equivalent of a Justin Gaethje in this division. She'll get drawn into the brawl. You look at it for Eubanks, I mean, the move down to 125, was it the biggest, most planned thing ever? Well, she was supposed to fight who, Matt? Karol Rosa earlier on this year. That fight falls out. So then she's supposed to fight Priscilla Cachoeira. That fight falls out. Then she's supposed to fight, Elise Reed, and that fight happens. Then she was supposed to fight on October 16th against, Luana Carolina. Sijara Eubanks was in Vegas, and then unfortunately COVID protocols, Eubanks is out. And then, the Mexican-Canadian Lupita Godinez gets that fight, and it didn't go all that well for her. So we look at the odds for this one. For Gatto, the underdog, but she opened a -130 favorite. She is a +172 underdog right now. For Eubanks, opened a +111 underdog. She's -212 favorite. If we look at the votes on Topology, surprised us there to you. Look at that, 800 votes, 70% Gatto, 65% by decision, 24% by submission. For the 30% that have Eubanks, 79% by decision. Matt, the odds have swayed heavily in the favor of one Sarj Eubanks at a 57% clip. The biggest mover and shaker on this card, by the way. Matt, Sijara Eubanks, when she gets people down, you're in trouble. That Elise Reed fight, ground and pound, tons of trouble. And the most underrated part of Eubanks' game is her grappling towards her jiu-jitsu. Melissa Gatto is sneaky on the ground. I have a hard time with this one. I'm going with the underdog in the younger fighter, Melissa Gatto, because I think the long-range weapons and the stick-to-itiveness are going to get it done for her in this fight. I really prefer having her at 125 at almost 26 years old than I do at an almost 37-year-old Eubanks.
This is the only fight where I think weight really is going to matter, so I'll put that up as a disclaimer right now. I gotta be honest, I think Sijara Eubanks is the top 5 fighter in this division. She just hasn't had the opportunity to show it yet. When I look at the top 5 of the women's flyweight division, you have people in there like Lauren Murphy, like Jessica I. You can't tell me Sijara Eubanks wouldn't put on extremely competitive performances, if not be favored against some of those fighters. Because at 125 pounds, no one's been able to out-grapple her yet. No one's been able to out-strike her yet. I really do think that this is a fighter who, at this weight, when everything is right, she truly is one of the best fighters at this division. So I have to pick Eubanks. But again, more than any other fight on this card, I have to say this. If she looks terrible on weigh-in day, or if she misses weight by 4 pounds, 3 pounds, even 1 pound, there's a good chance I switch my pick. I just think with Eubanks, her physical strength is really unmatched at this division other than Jessica Andrade. She has phenomenal wrestling defense, so I think it'll be very hard for Gatto to get her to the mat if she doesn't like the striking range. And if Sijara really wants to get some of that ground and pound off, Gatto is someone who will spend a lot of time on her back trying to set up her submissions, and I don't think Eubanks is going to give her some of that time to stall and really set up for the big action. I think Eubanks is going to make her pay a lot, and what's the quote? You punch a black belt in the head once, it turns them into a brown belt, and then turns them into a purple belt and a blue belt. I think Eubanks will be able to follow that game plan.
I've got the classic Polyana Viana approach with Melissa Gatto. I think she's going to get it done. Matt is going with Sarj, who's in charge of Sijara Eubanks. That's a pick for Matt. And I'm really looking forward to this fight. We're going to learn a lot about this division and how things are going to shake out. Maybe the winner gets a Miranda Maverick. I think that one might be in the cards. I absolutely love this one and the rest of our card. Hey, Wonder Boy's fighting Bilal Muhammad in the co-main event. Derek Lewis taking on Chris Daukaus in the main. You're not going to want to miss. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it.